Have a great day. And you know what? God loves you. Cheers.
A mom and devoted content creator has been identified as one of the people found dead inside of a burning home alongside her adult son and his girlfriend. Now, authorities have also revealed that the 3 victims were dead before the fire started. We've got expert analysis from an arson investigator to figure out what is going on here. Welcome to Sidebar, presented by Law&Crime. I'm Jesse Weber. We really appreciate you guys sticking with us as we cover these really, really tough stories. And one of the ways that we want to say thank you is by telling you about this really cool sponsor of ours. It's called Upside, and it's actually a free app that gets you cash back on daily essentials like gas and groceries. So for instance, when I pump my gas, if I use Upside, I can get cash back when I fill up my tank. This is real cash back. It's money that appears in your Upside app that you can transfer straight into your bank account. So once you have the Upside app, you claim an offer for whatever you're buying on Upside at tons of places like 7-Eleven, Exxon, Taco Bell. You pay as usual using a debit or credit card. You follow the steps on the app and you get paid. So to find out how much you can earn, you can click the link in the description to download Upside or scan the QR code on screen and use our promo code SIDEBAR and you'll get an extra 25 cents back on every gallon on your first tank of gas. Again, really appreciate Upside as a sponsor and for you guys for watching. All right, let's get back to it.
Let's do these morning affirmations. I affirm to be happy. I affirm to be grateful. I affirm to do the very best I can in everything I do.
A community in Texas is in mourning after 3 people were found dead inside of their home in Cypress. This is outside of Houston. And one of those people was 54-year-old Kelly Ann Masciarelli, an avid social media user who often posted selfies and videos. And the other 2 victims, her 23-year-old son, Kolin Foster, and Foster's live-in girlfriend, Cameryn Richard. In fact, according to Cameron's social media post, she just turned 21 not too long ago. Family and friends have spoken out to local media, described all 3 as great people. You get the sense of how much they meant to those around them. And then this happens. So what happened? Well, firefighters responded to Masciarelli's home Sunday morning just after 7 a.m. And when they put out the flames, they find the 3 bodies. But they also found what they suspected pointed to foul play. Namely that an accelerant was used. Homicide detectives reportedly believe all 3 were dead before the fire started, that this was likely a way for the killer to cover their tracks. Now, investigators haven't announced how all 3 died. We don't know the cause of death. We believe this is now being determined a homicide, but the cause of death is still an unknown, and they're going to be waiting on the autopsy results. And according to KTRK out in Houston, investigators are trying to find a suspect, but they haven't said publicly who that might be. So it's unclear from the reporting if they have somebody in mind and they can't find the person, or if they're really just trying to determine a suspect. It's also unclear if anyone else lived in that home with Kelly Ann, Kolin, and Cameryn. But here's what's really interesting. While detectives were on the scene, they collected a lot of evidence, even towing away Kolin's red Corvette. And that had been parked in the driveway, and it appeared undamaged. Now, why is that important? Well, first of all, Kelly Ann actually posted a photo of this Corvette on her Facebook page last Thursday, commenting on Kolin's, quote, new toy. And authorities told KPRC that Kolin, who recently celebrated his birthday, had bought the car and that the previous owner was not a suspect, but they also said that a neighbor heard a car door slam in the middle of the night, and when they looked, they didn't recognize the person driving the Corvette. Investigators, they're now looking for any video from the area to see if any new leads might come from security cameras that are mounted on nearby homes. So a lot of unknowns at this point. This is such a tough story to report on. It's not easy. This is not easy. It is important. It is an important story to talk about nonetheless. And I always say it's our privilege to be able to bring you these stories. And we're able to do that because of the support that we get from our sponsors. And I just want to call out one in particular right now, Morgan & Morgan, an incredible partner of ours, America's largest injury law firm. Look, if you should get hurt, this is a firm with over 1,000 attorneys. you may want in your corner. Verdicts and settlements in the multi-millions, a full dedicated team, no upfront fee. The whole process can be done straight from your smartphone. It is all so easy and client-focused. So if you're injured, you can easily start a claim at forthepeople.com/LC Sidebar. Okay, let's get back to it. But right now, I want to bring in a special guest. Arson investigator and president of PyroCop Fire and Life Safety Consulting Services, Robert Rowe, to talk more about this. Robert, thank you so much for coming on. Thank you for the work that you do. How do you even begin an arson investigation?
Well, it's a very meticulous process, and the reason for that is that should you go to court on any type of a case on this, with regarding to the topic that we've just discussed, the evidence we've discussed, it's a type of system. It's called the scientific methodology, and that scientific methodology is outlined in the publication through the National Fire Protection Association, and that is the Guide to Fire and Explosion Investigations. Now, in the field, a lot of investigators say it's kind of tedious. There's a lot that you have to process, and in this case, it's going to be, the interviews. It's going to be the evaluation of evidence. There's a lot involved there, but this guidebook kind of helps an investigator go through it. So it is a scientific methodology where you collect evidence, you process that evidence, you develop a hypothesis as to what you believe as being the cause of the fire or the person's responsible for the fire. And then you develop this hypothesis and you have to prove it. When you go into the courtroom, you will get beat up pretty hard by the attorneys because they use that standard of care in order to question the experts, or in this case, it would be the arson investigators. So defense attorneys will grill the investigator as to how they performed their investigation, and they'll pick it apart if they have an opportunity to. So
I don't know what you're talking about. Defense attorneys questioning experts in a courtroom trial. What on earth do you mean, Robert? I've never seen anything like that before. My gosh, you mean questioning credentials and questioning past cases? I don't know what you mean. But no, truth be told, I completely understand exactly what you're saying. And I have to tell you, I imagine. Look, I think any investigation is probably difficult, but when you're dealing with arson, what are the particular difficulties with an arson investigation? I feel like there's so many unknowns and so much damaged evidence. So if you could walk us through what are some of the difficulties you think in these kinds of cases, and particularly the one that we're looking at here?
Well, the difficulty, as you just said, which is pretty much the case, is that the evidence has been exposed to fire, high levels of heat. It's just basically the evaluation. As an investigator, we walk into a fire scene. First of all, we have to prevent contamination of that fire scene. So that means you have to isolate the property. Only a certain number of people can go in. They have to sign in. They have to sign out. So you basically have to secure the site. That's the number one thing investigators do. And the other part of that equation, as the attorneys will, again, meet you in the courtroom, is, are you qualified to conduct that investigation? So every investigator that walks into the scene, they had better have the proper training and the experience levels to be able to take that case into the courtroom. So with regard to the actual investigation, you're absolutely correct. The scene can be completely gone. You may not have a whole lot to work with. But in some cases, the firefighters get in there and they will extinguish the fire in a quick order. And you may have some preserved evidence, which is really nice for the investigator. But it's still the same process. You have to photograph and document each piece of evidence you collect. You have to then log it, and then you have to pack it properly. And then you preserve it in an evidence locker until it's time for going into either a prelim or whatever that may be. So with regard to the fire scene, what we look at is we look at a lot of things. You walk in, you get better at it as you get more seasoned, because when you walk into a fire scene, you determine, is this accidental or does this look intentional? And you have to make that decision. And there are little clues that may arise. Maybe you might smell a little gasoline. Maybe you may see a fire trailer that is only a little line in the carpet that is going to another area that's heavily burned. So you may see signs of an accelerant being poured or placed in a particular room or area of the house. It could be the whole house. So so you're looking at you're smelling. You're looking at fire patterns.
Can I focus on that point for 1 second?
Yeah,
I'm always
absolutely.
curious
Yes. Any question you may have.
when they say like an accelerant was used, and they seem to know that here, they seem to signify. A part of me wondered, well, wouldn't that have been burned up? How on earth could you know an accelerant was used? But you describing there could be a pool of an accelerant in one corner, or you might smell gasoline. It's that obvious that those are the ways that they would be able to determine an accelerant. Is there other ways?
Well, so, yeah, there are other ways, and surprisingly, that first way of detecting a suspicious fire is pretty common. But there are times when the fire consumes either the home or the evidence so thoroughly that you may have to bring in a canine. And they train canines in order to detect trace evidence of an accelerant. It could be alcohol, gasoline. There's all types of different products that the dogs are trained for. And it's just a tool. It's not an all encompassing investigation when you bring a dog in. It's just another tool in your tool bag. And they're very effective, and a well-trained dog can really help you out, is at least honing in on an area. And at that point, you have to start collecting samples, and you have to start taking control samples from areas that weren't burned, and then you have the same carpet material, and then you take the area where you believe the accelerant was poured, and then you collect those, and then you submit those to the lab, and you request that the lab look at certain types of an accelerant. So at that point, then you're really, now the science is kind of coming into the equation. You're collecting your evidence. You may take a lot of photographs of burn patterns on the wall, on the floor. The floor may, if it's a raised floor, you could see evidence of gasoline dripping through the planks of the wood in the house. So that is a deep char type of burn. You may have to collect that section of wood of the floor. So it can be, you have to either accelerate into the evidence collection or you decelerate, saying, well, we might not need that. And it's sometimes very hard, but it's always better to collect a lot more than not collecting enough.
Sure.
So,
sure.
So then all this goes to a lab, and then you have that lab experience.
And how do they know that these people in this case died before the fire, or they seem to indicate that they know they died before the fire was set? Is it because there was no soot in their lungs?
Well, and that's a very good point, because a lot of the cases that involve fatalities, you do, during the autopsies, most investigators will attend the autopsy to get direct information from the attending physician. But what they do is they do check for soot in the lungs, and whether it's post-mortem fatality from smoke inhalation or that it was a cover-up homicide. And I've been on both of them. You have to be very careful on those as well, because now you're intermingling your investigation with the homicide detectives. And so you have to be very careful about, what it is you do and how you preserve the body. And there's just a lot happening there. So, and then most of that evidence that you've just talked about with regard to the autopsy is kind of a shared type of information. They want to know, number one, was the person murdered before the fire? And then we want to know, based on, the levels of CO in the system, carbon monoxide in the system, what happened there. So we're basically working in unison together. And that's I've always been, very close to our police officers and law enforcement that are on these scenes, because it's a shared investigation.
And from a legal point of view, whether the person was killed before or after the fire is set is also important in terms of the charges that someone will face as well. I imagine the autopsy could be difficult. If you have a body that is particularly damaged by fire, that must present its own kind of difficulties, right?
It does, and part of an investigator's evaluation is to look at the burn patterns on a body as well. You may have damaged body, to the body on the right side, and they may be laying on their side. And somebody may say, well, the fire started, I was in this area, which was completely opposite of where the damage to the body is. So there's, you can corroborate their story just by saying, well, wait a minute, we've got damage on the right side of the body, but you're saying that, you saw it on this side. So that, you've got to be able to weed all that information out and put it into perspective. So.
And one of the things, two things that I thought were really unique about this, and I think that's interesting, and I'm curious your perspective on this. It's being reported that one of the victims was found on the first floor. The other two were located upstairs. So whenever you have victims in a house that are found in different locations, it kind of gives you, I think, a time frame of how the killings occurred, but also I think it's interesting as well. And this happened again, the fire was set at 7 a.m. in the early morning. What do those two factors tell you about this investigation?
Well, obviously, you're going to want to look at human behavior and what was going on before the fire. What were they doing? Were they sleeping? Did they get up to brush their teeth? Did they, were they fixing breakfast? I mean, there's all these different things. You have to be able to sort that out. And as far as the time of day, it's rare that you have a fatality fire at 7 a.m. when most people are getting up. Yeah. It usually occurs late night, midnight, so the time of day is a factor when we're doing investigations.
Because that takes time, right? It would take time to actually set the fire and have no one notice.
That's correct. That's correct. And then the other thing too is every arsonist that I've dealt with usually loves the cover of night. So they're not seen. Cameras, it's hard to make out, identities with cameras and so if you don't, if you're in daylight time, there's a chance that you're going to get the color of your pants, the color of your hair, your build, all that, because you're well lit up. So a lot of the times, a lot of the arsons I've had, it's been late night or early morning.
I tell you what, look, I hope they find out who's responsible. And the Harris County Sheriff's Office is asking anybody with information about the case, contact its homicide unit at 713-274-9100. You can also call Crime Stoppers of Houston at 713-222-TIPS. Before I let you go, Robert, let me ask you real quick, do you have confidence, given the different elements of this crime, the different details I laid out, do you have confidence that it will be solved?
Well, there's a lot more detail that hasn't been disclosed to the public for obvious reasons, because it's an active investigation. But, after reading the story, after listening to a few little things, I would probably be suspicious as well. And, the investigation, like I said, I think very important that a fire investigator knows his or her role and where they are as far as their part of the investigation. We don't want to crisscross over into the police department's investigation, sure. Homicide. And it's just good relationship to work together on these cases. So, there may be, they say, everybody loves a firefighter, right? And not so much with the police department these days, but, God bless them. They put up with a lot. But the thing is that people sometimes talk to firefighters a lot more candid than they would with law enforcement. And so, sometimes we will kind of weave in, those two areas of expertise to kind of get to the bottom of it. And it's been successful. We've had a lot of convictions when I was in the former, in the city of Downey. We did quite well. Yeah. There may be an arson task force that they're using other departments, the expertise of other departments. But it's a cohesive investigation that I'm sure they're going to do fine. It's just getting very, digging down in the facts and making the proper interviews, but they'll probably find their person.
All right. Well, listen, you guys play such an important role in this, particularly this kind of case. So Robert Rowe, arson investigator, president of Pyro Cop, and I will say right now, not only such a valued guest, but arguably one of the best backgrounds of any guest we have seen. Such a little tropical paradise you're in right there. But Robert, enjoy the day. It looks beautiful. Thank you so much for coming on, sir. Appreciate it.
All right. You take care of yourself.
All right, everybody. That's all we have for you right now here on Sidebar. Thank you so much for joining us. And as always, please subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Jesse Weber. Speak to you next time.